Good afternoon, everyone. This is Wendy Zadeb, the Executive Director at MASSP, and I'm joined in this webinar by Ted Gardella from the College Board. We're really happy that you were able to join us for this webinar so we can give you an update on the released items issue. And I'm assuming that most of you that are logged on, you're MASSP members, and we sent out an alert just giving you the news that over the last couple of years, we've been really enjoying the fact that we get released items along with PSAT 8-9, PSAT 10, and the SAT. And certainly it was a little bit of a bummer to find that we are now going to have released items for the state assessment for SAT, but we're no longer going to be able to get those for PSAT 8, 9, and 10. So knowing that you would probably want more information about that and to know the why, we invited Ted Gardella to join us here today from the College Board. And Ted's going to share with you kind of the rationale about that, and also tell us about, I think, a pretty exciting new feature that we're going to have that I wouldn't say is quite a replacement, but something that would still help you to be able to make good use of your data. So thanks so much for being with us, Ted. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to be able to kind of take this time with MASSP members and share the information and also take some questions at the end.
Happy to do it, Wendy. And again, the questions are going to come in through Q&A, and we'll try and get to all of them. I think we should have plenty of time to do that.
Before we get going, one more thing, guys, just to remember, there's a Q&A section at the bottom of your page, and that's where you want to post your questions. And then there's a chat box. The chat box is really just for if like you're having a difficulty hearing us or something of that nature, you just want to post something, a comment there. But Q&A needs to be in the Q&A actual section.
Great, thanks. Let me share my slideshow. So when we talk about the question analysis report in the educator portal, we need to talk about kind of the underlying framework of the QAR, the question analysis report, and that is test form disclosure. So in this short PowerPoint, I'll try and explain what test form disclosure means, the impact of form disclosure on the question analysis report, and then we'll talk about the new resource that we're developing to help teachers and educators and principals really not just analyze their results, but act upon the results. So what is form disclosure? For the past 4 years, the operational spring SAT suite accountability assessment forms have been disclosed. What does that mean? That means the test forms that are used on the initial day of the MME implementation, so the initial day of the SAT, the Tuesday that we give the first SAT, and then the initial days for PSAT 8-9 and PSAT 10, those forms have been disclosed. The makeup forms for the SAT have not been disclosed. So for the past 4 years, you would have data on all students who took the initial test, which we call the operational form, but you would not have gotten that same information for makeup test forms for the SAT. Because we had one form of PSAT 8-9, we were using that same form for the operational test, for accommodated testers, and also for makeups. And that led to the implementation where we would, take the test booklets, use them on the first day, save those test booklets, use them during the accommodated window, and actually use those same test booklets for the makeup window. A very, very different experience for SAT in that SAT testers had the operational test. There were accommodated materials that were sent, but test coordinators actually had to order makeup exams and still have to order makeup exams for SAT. So once those forms were used, we would release the forms. So we provided copies, PDF copies during these past 4 years. You were able to give those test booklets back to the students after they got their scores. And then you saw the questions released in the College Board score portal for educators through the question analysis report, and students saw the test questions through their College Board accounts. So what's going to change under form disclosure? Well, first of all, I'd like to really emphasize the question analysis report is not going away. You will still have access to the question analysis report, both for disclosed forms and also for non-disclosed forms. So I'm going to show you the difference between the question analysis report for each. So what's on screen now is a disclosed form question analysis report. This is the one that's familiar to everyone. So as we look at the QAR, within these columns for student responses, you have the percentage of students that answered the question using choice A, using choice B, using choice C, and using choice D, or omitting. So the student response percentages are included for each question in a disclosed form QAR. Also, as many of you know, you're able to click on the question number, and that is a hyperlink directly to the actual item that was used on the test. So this is the QAR that you're all familiar with. This screen shows you the changes. So this is the QAR for a non-disclosed form. So you will still have access to the question analysis report, but there will be some functionality that changes. So the first thing to notice is that the student response percentages will not be displayed for a non-disclosed form. You'll see NA not applicable under choice A, choice B, choice C, and choice D. And you will also not be able to click on the question number to see the actual test question because the forms are not disclosed, so the questions are not released. So you will still get the question analysis report. Functionality will change. This change will happen for PSAT 8-9 and PSAT 10. But the SAT form will continue to be disclosed for 2020 and 2021. So for the next 2 years, you will still have the disclosed form functionality for the SAT, for the 11th grade test. And you'll have the non-disclosed form functionality for P8-9 and P10. So let's talk a little bit about, the why, the big question of why is this happening? So there are multiple states that use PSAT 8-9 and PSAT 10 in the SAT for accountability. And all of those states have requested multiple secure test forms for accountability. That means that they would like to have a secure form for the operational date, a secure form for the accommodated window that is different from the form for the operational date, and a secure form for makeups. So that means for the PSAT 8-9, we would need to have 3 secure forms for grade 8 and 3 secure forms for grade 9 in order to accomplish this. And then 3 secure forms for PSAT 10. Because states use the tests in different windows, the absolute best practice for assessment security would be to have those secure test forms for each state that's testing in a different window. So for everyone who's testing in the same April window, we would use those 3 secure forms. But let's say that a state chose to deliver a test after the initial April test dates for Michigan. We would want different secure forms for that state. So this year, we've already begun this process, and there will be different forms of the PSAT 8-9 for grades 8 and 9. You'll recall that last year, which was our first year for 8th grade, we used the same form in grades 8 and 9, which meant students could actually test together. This year, students in 8th grade and students in 9th grade must test separately. Also, the test booklets must be returned. You're not allowed to keep the test booklets once the testing window is over. So you'll keep the test booklets for the accommodated window, you'll keep the test booklets for makeup, but then once all testing is concluded, you'll send the test booklets back because they are now secure forms and they will not be released. Again, the SAT form will continue to be a release form for 2020 and 2021. Because of this test form development, after quite an extensive analysis on the College Board side, we recognized that we could not develop all of the forms needed and continue to release items and forms over the next few years. So we're working to develop all of these additional forms. This year, there will be one test form for grade 8, one test form for grade 9, and you'll use them throughout the operational date, the accommodated window, and the makeup date. In future years, PSAT 8-9 and PSAT 10 will become much more SAT-like. You'll have a test form for the operational window, you'll get accommodated materials, and then you'll actually order the test forms that you need for makeups. So it will become more like the SAT. Let's stop there before we talk about the new resource and see what questions we have that we can address.
So Ted, just to reiterate, this year or last year, 8th graders and 9th graders took the exact same test form.
Correct.
And so you could have potentially had 8th graders and 9th graders testing in the same room.
Correct.
But this year, 8th graders and 9th graders, although PSAT 8-9 is the same test, they will be taking different forms.
That's correct.
Okay.
And there's actually an icon, and we're covering this in our implementation workshops. So the 8th grade form will have an icon that will identify it as the form to be used with 8th graders. And the 9th grade form will have an icon on the test booklet that will indicate this is the form to be used with 9th graders. Again, you'll hold on to those books through the accommodated window and for makeups. But then once your makeups are done, you'll pack up the test booklets and send them back. So you'll no longer have access to those hard copy test booklets that you have had in years past.
Okay, so all of this released item talk has been related to, schools that are taking PSAT 8-9, PSAT 10, and SAT as part of the state assessment. As there are many, many schools that do fall testing in various grades, whether they're fall testing 8th graders, 9th graders, 10th graders, and many 11th graders are taking the PSAT and MSQT. So if they fall test, obviously, on their own time and using their own funds, not related to the state assessment, what about released items for those assessments?
So fall testing will continue to be released. One of the things that we can note in PSAT 8-9, the fall window is a very long window. It starts in September and you can test through January. So it's very hard to keep that test form secure throughout the entire testing window. So the fall P8-9 will continue to be a release form. So you'll have the disclosed form QAR where you'll see the student test responses and you'll be able to click on the item. Same thing for PSAT and MSQT. That will continue to be a release form. But with PSAT and MSQT, we all know that that is a very, very tight window. You have 3 one-day periods where you can deliver that test. So you don't have the long window there to give that. But those will continue to be release forms, so they would have the disclosed form QAR.
So for in most cases, what kind of has been going on is if districts fall test, a lot of them typically do that in October, and then the results are in by December.
Correct.
And then that gives you basically from obviously when kids return from, let's say, Christmas break until, April when they take the state assessment for remediation purposes.
Yes. And so as long as P8-9 is given before or at the same time as PSAT and MSQT, the P8-9 results will get delivered in December, as you say. If you're giving the PSAT 8-9 in November, you're not going to get results back in December. However, the College Board is working to decrease the reporting time that's needed. So we hope to announce in the next few years that we're actually going to accelerate that. So maybe results will be back in November as opposed to December. So we're working on that for fall testing. But again, I want to be very specific. You have to give the fall test before the PN window or during the PSAT and MSQT window in order to get those early test results back.
Okay, so another thing that people might be concerned about is, how does this impact students? Because obviously we had a number of districts who were being very diligent about having kids go into the computer lab, setting up a College Board account, setting up a Khan Academy account, making sure those two were linked. And in many districts, counselors or teachers were taking kids into their College Board account, going through the actual test with them where they could, once again, same as staff, see the test item. So if they do that in the spring and they want to, take the kids into the College Board account, will they have anything that's really usable there? Or, is it just going to be the continued benefit of the kind of customized remediation that they'll still at least benefit from?
That's a great question. So yes, the functionality where currently they can go into their College Board account, they can see their score, and then they can actually see the test questions. They'll lose that test question view functionality, but they'll still have the full breadth of score reporting. The other thing, which is really an important point to note, having a College Board account linked to a Khan Academy account, the data that flows between the two doesn't depend on form disclosure. So having a linked Khan Academy account means that the student's score and question metadata will continue to flow. So a student will still receive that same customized Khan practice. What they'll lose is the ability to see the specific test question. But all of the data about their performance on that test, that's still going to flow into Khan Academy. So say, for instance, that they answered question number 22 correctly, and that question number 22 is a heart of algebra question, it's a medium. All of that data is still going to flow into Khan because Khan wasn't actually consuming the test question itself. They were consuming the metadata about the question to set up the customized practice. So customized practice with Khan is still going to be the same powerful resource for students that it is. And students will still be able to see their scores, their sub-scores. They'll know from Khan Academy what they should spend their time working on, but they just won't be able to see that individual test question.
So it's still, if they want to do the Khan Academy customized free official SAT practice, they still need to have the College Board account linked with the Khan account to make that work.
Absolutely. Okay. And one of the things that we're doing, that our team is doing, we're actually stepping up the training that we deliver around Khan official SAT practice, because we know that for many schools with grades other than 10 and 11, they want to know how they can use Khan productively without using official SAT practice. So we've actually been doing a lot more to help folks understand how to use the teacher tools in Khan and the reports that come, and then Khan's search function to really think about how can I use all of these other resources that are in Khan that aren't official SAT practice, but maybe they're appropriate for using with 8th and 9th graders. So all of that powerful Khan practice, that's still there. And the relationship between the Student College Board account and Khan Academy account is still important.
Great. Okay. Well, I think maybe, we'll certainly go back and check for questions when we're done in total, but maybe that was a few clarifying points as you're start talking about the new repository. And like the rest of you that are tuning in now, I'm just hearing about this from Ted, and from what I've already gleaned, I can see just off the top of my head a lot of good potential for this new content repository. So why don't you give everybody the skinny on that?
All right, thanks, Wendy. So we know that the College Board field team is very committed to supporting instruction, supporting schools, improving their accountability, improving their instruction and student results. And so we very much knew that losing that QAR functionality would be a disappointment in Michigan. And we began the work of developing a new resource for educators to use. And so this new resource is going to be called the SAT Suite Content Repository. So for the last 4 years, we've been releasing a lot of test forms. There's a lot of test questions that we can no longer use. And so we're taking all of those released form questions and putting them into a searchable repository of SAT Suite questions. So you'll have multiple released forms of all 3 SAT Suite assessments. So multiple released forms of P8, PSAT 8-9, P10, PSAT, and MSQT, and SAT. So these released questions will be able to be searched and outputted to be used either for targeted practice or for formative assessments. We've gotten a lot of requests over these couple of years for, gosh, I wish we could have more forms of P8-9 that we could use for practice. Well, now you're going to have all of those questions that you'll be able to search, and actually you'll be able to customize. So you'll be able to search and filter the content repository for questions based on test attributes like assessment, level of difficulty, sub-score, etc. So in many, many ways, people have been able to filter their question analysis report results, but they've only been able to filter them to a certain level, and that's really the subscore level. So you've been able to filter based on heart of algebra. But this content repository is going to provide you with a much finer granularity of test question attributes, and that will mean that you can use them to build formative assessments. You can use them to build practice sheets that are really targeted at that tier 2 intervention in a multi-tiered system of supports. And so you'll be able to measure the impact of your instructional interventions in a much more agile and nimble way. So let me show you the searchable test question attributes. So just as you've always been able to, if you go into the question analysis report, you know when you're in the SAT or the P10 or P8, 9. So you'll be able to search the content repository for questions that are from the PSAT 10. You'll be able to filter based on the test section. So are these questions from the reading test or the writing and language test or the mathematics test? But new, so this is something you've never had access to, new, you'll be able to search the question, the content repository for questions based on the text complexity of the reading passage. So many folks, as we've gone around and worked with QAR and worked with the instructional planning report, we've heard people say, well, gosh, I wish I knew what the text complexity level was of the reading passage around these 10 questions. Because maybe the issue is that my students don't have, the ability to process higher levels of text complexity. So you've never been able to answer that question. Now you'll be able to. So every passage that's included in the content repository, all those questions, you'll be able to search by text complexity and say, I'd like to see all of the reading passage questions that are at text complexity level for 9th and 10th grade. So that'll be brand new. You've always been able to look for cross-test scores, subscores, and level of difficulty. But now, and again, this is what's exciting to me as a curriculum person, you'll be able to search for questions based on the content dimension of the test question. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute, but it provides for a much finer granularity. You've always been able to search for heart of algebra. But what about the content dimensions within heart of algebra? What is it within heart of algebra that's causing our student scores to be at X level? So those are two new attributes for educators for them to be able to see. So let me just quickly go over and share a different screen so that you can see what I'm talking about when I talk about text complexity, or I'm sorry, when I talk about content domain. So in the College Board's teacher implementation guide, and this is something that we really used extensively in years 1 and 2. We were really helping people to understand what is the SAT, what are the test questions, how is it built. And so back in years 1 and 2, we spent a lot of time on the content dimensions and the domains. So here's an example from the teacher implementation guide of the SAT reading domains that helps us build questions. And so the content dimension could be text complexity, or it could be information and ideas. It could be reading closely. And then underneath reading closely, you have a content dimension of determining explicit meanings. So you'll be able to search the content repository for test questions that were built around the reading closely content dimension. So maybe you think that students need to do more with close reading techniques, and that's why they're struggling on the reading test. Well, now you'll be able to make an instructional intervention and then test the impact very, very specifically using the content repository questions. If we wanted to look at mathematics, so again, we were always able to see the heart of algebra subscore, but there are content dimensions underneath the heart of algebra. So which content dimension is the one that's creating a score level? So you'll be able to search for those questions that are specific to systems of 2 linear equations and 2 variables. You change your instruction in that content dimension. Now you can measure the impact of the instruction in a very formative way. So you're not waiting until the summative evaluation of the spring implementation. You can actually do this during the school year. That, I think, is what's very exciting about the content repository. The second thing that is exciting to me is we've had this fantastic partnership with MASSP, done a lot of great work, and partnerships with ISDs and RESAs as well. And we expect that as we're building this new tool, we're going to be sharing the new tool at various stages with MASSP, getting their feedback and thinking about what's going to be the best functionality for schools that will help them continue the great work that they've been doing around your data protocol and all of the work that you do with your members. So we want to continue that partnership and continue to support the work that folks are doing.
So along those lines, Ted, if, you know, I'm sure many people that are listening to the webinar have gone through the MASSP data protocol workshop where they have been able to query their strengths and weaknesses. Is that functionality still available? So you could determine kind of like, you know, like what are your items of strength and weakness, and then could you find items from the repository that would look similar?
So I think you still will be able to do that, but you won't be able to see the specific item. Mm-hmm. So you'll be able to go in and say, okay, well, so 60% of our students answered this question correctly. So that means it's a question I want to look at, because we're not at that 75% level or that 80% level or whatever they spend their time looking at. And you know, the only issue I think is we're going to lose the ability to see some common misperceptions, like right. What, you know, 60%, 40% are getting it wrong, but they're choosing the same wrong answer.
Yeah.
And we
what
want to
was
know
that distractor?
So, right.
Yeah.
So while you've had that for 4 years and you've been able to really think, you know, at that level, you'll lose that, but you'll still say, okay, so heart of algebra, easy, medium, hard questions. So I want to look at the content repository and say, okay, within Heart of Algebra, let's try and do something to really survey what's going on. You can build a short practice test that will inform you. So you'll have released items that you can build out of the content repository. So maybe you just build a, you know, I keep saying Heart of Algebra because I'm an old algebra teacher. But let's say you just build a Heart of Algebra sub-score test, practice test, give it to your students. Now you have that granularity of the content dimension, so you can have multiple content dimensions, and now you'll be able to figure out what it is that's really causing that sub-score to be at that level.
Okay, well, I'm personally excited about obviously seeing that, because in my mind, I'm running through various ways that I think I would use that. So certainly more to come, and definitely appreciated that, the College Board saw, that, there was a need for some level of feedback and for people to be able to see items and to be able to prepare students appropriately. And, I know nobody wants to, skill and drill test and, run all kinds of old items and things like that. But it certainly helps teachers to just be able to see the way questions are phrased, or, they're teaching that content, but maybe not in the way that it's being measured on the assessment. And so I think having that item repository and being able to see, a number of items in words and context and how that question is set up, it just makes teachers more familiar with the test, and then obviously allows them to provide more items to students to interact with.
Agreed. One of the things we talk about a lot as we look at this new content repository is it actually switches the philosophy from more of a, to be honest, more of a passive look back. When you're looking at QAR, you're looking at what your students did. When you use the content repository, you're really going to be much more active, and you're going to be forward-looking and saying, I changed my instruction based on the data that I had. I want to know if that had an impact on that particular subscore or that content dimension. So you'll become a lot more active and forward-looking as opposed to looking back at what students did. Recognize the importance of the QAR. That's been emphasized over and over, and MASSP has done great work. My field team has been working with schools and districts. But we're also excited about the prospects that this new tool will give us. And one of the things that we do through our partnership is we're going to make sure that MASSP leadership and MASSP membership gets that first glimpse at the tool, so that they can begin to make plans for when they get their scores back in 2020 summer.
So I'm not seeing any questions, guys. Maybe I answered or asked the questions that you were thinking yourselves, but we'll just give you just a couple of seconds to see if anybody types in a question. And as we're waiting for that, I just wanted to let everybody know that MASSP has been working with TED and the College Board again and trying to put together some videos and some information about CLEP which is a really great opportunity for students as well. So that's going to be something that we'll have coming in the future. And Lori Johnson just asked if we'll be sharing these slides. And yes, this is recorded, so we'll have these and we'll also have the slides available.
Sure. And hopefully, one of the things that I really hope is, we've had such great success at EdCon. We have great turnout at sessions. It really is an impactful conference, and hopefully, it will continue to have the population that comes and turns out, and we'll be able to do a session on the content repository and how we're going to partner to move forward.
That would be fantastic. And I know everybody looks forward to EdCon, and that just gives us another great thing that we know is going to be happening there. So thanks, everyone. Not seeing any more questions. We're going to wrap things up. And thank you again so much, Ted, for your time and for always being a good partner and for being responsive to the field on this.
We really appreciate the opportunity to work with you.